everyone. Welcome to my cooking journey as I practice my knife skills and other cooking techniques to be a better chef. For this video, I will be using probably the first knife I ever bought from Del Strong. This came from their Omega series. I believe this is the Kitsune. It's a chef knife. Probably the first knife I ever bought from Del Strong. And this is going to be the main knife I'm going to be using in the majority of my cooking videos. But I figured for this first video, I want to discuss something that's very important with cooking, which I feel can be very overlooked, and that is the mise en place. What that just means is prepping ingredients, and so some of the main things for any recipe is carrots, celery, and onion. Basically anything you're gonna cook, like maybe a soup or stew, or maybe saute something. 1, 2, or even all these will be probably the main ingredients you'll be using. Or maybe just a salad. These are pretty standard ingredients, but one important thing about mise en place is having containers. I picked these up from HomeSense. These are nice little stainless steel containers, good for storing ingredients for later cooking. So if you have a busy day, you can just cut off the ends here. And a good technique for cooking is, where I learned from culinary school, is actually the claw method. You're going to cut like this, and the knuckle of your middle finger essentially becomes like the guide for your knife. And basically use that to get as thin or as thick of the cuts you want. I usually go up for this thickness, but I kind of like when I cook, I like having my vegetables fairly thick. I don't like them to get too thin, but I like the texture that they give me. And that is slicing celery. And the good thing with these types of containers here is you can take your bench scraper. Another thing is, when you're going to scoop something up, you want to use a bench scraper, not your knife, because scraping your knife on your cutting board will dull the blade. And you see here, you can put this in here, put your lid on it, and store that for later. So we're going to finish cutting up this celery right here. Obviously, the thinner you cut these, the more ingredients you'll pretty much have. So depending on what you're cooking, so there we go. So lid on that, and you can store this in the fridge for when you're ready to cook. Same thing with something like onion. The way I like to cut this is I like to cut in half, but since we're discussing mise en place, actually before we get into that, I'm gonna put the kitsune knife aside because I just realized since I am cutting vegetables, I can break out probably my favorite knife. And this is another one from Dalstrong, from their Gladiator series. The Nakiri, and what's interesting about this Nakiri is it's very holy. And this is a very interesting knife for cutting vegetables, to keep them from sticking. You get a nice clean cut on this. And just kind of peel off your onion. And onions, I like to go very, very fine with these. Especially the yellow onion, because these usually are used for sauteing. As you always, you go with the claw motion. And of course, we can always go back and make sure these are small. But cooking is all about practice. Don't get nervous if you don't get something right the first time. Because what really matters is how your food tastes. As always, with our bench scraper. Again, cut off the root here. You have the first layer of our onion, because this tends to be the more tougher part. Just take the first layer off. Got our onions ready. And now we have our carrots. Obviously, you can't really peel these by hand. I mean, you can try, but the way I like to peel these is just laying it down. And just kind of go like this. And just kind of roll it, make sure you got everything. I don't really worry too much about getting every bit of skin off. The skin doesn't really bother me. Just for presentation wise. I sometimes forget about the bench scraper. And I've always been having a little container to put your waste. Helps keep your cooking area very clean. The carrots, let's cut off these little end pieces. Because these are fairly larger, we would just cut down to size. Now there are many ways to cut this. For me personally, the way I do it is I like to go in half. For making a salad, I'll roll. I'll make these little half circle chips. I'm going with a salad. Or you can go, just angle your knife a little bit like that and little diagonal cuts. That little snack piece. Or just roll it. I believe these are bias cuts, I believe. These are good for stews. There's nice little presentation cuts, but there are a lot of different ways to cut these carrots. They're a good vegetable to practice your knife cuts on. They're very sturdy. The chips here, these thin ones, I usually use those for salads. These bigger chunks, you would use those for stews. I should go back to Kiratsune. I feel more comfortable with this knife. And this is another type of cut. I have to be careful the knife doesn't stick, but we got little dice cuts here. These little cuts are usually what you would use in a nice soup. I've cut these plenty of times in my culinary classes. We're just gonna keep all of our carrots here because I don't really have enough containers. But normally you would separate all your knife cuts depending on what you want to use. But for the purpose of this video, just essentially mise en place. Now we have our onions, our celery, and our carrots all cut up and ready for when we're ready to cook it. And that is one of the most important things I took out of my culinary classes was organization, having containers to put all my ingredients before I cook, having a good knife, nice bench scraper, and a peeler. These are your main tools for cooking. These are the ones we want to focus on. A good bench scraper, just so you can scoop your ingredients. Like I said, when you scrape your knife, you're kind of like really, you're gonna damage the blade. And you want to keep these knives in a good condition, so they stay nice and sharp. But I'm beginning to stutter. Anyway, I hope you found this video informative, and I look forward to sharing more in my culinary journey as I become a chef. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Goodbye.